Okay,
Okay.
so getting started. Yeah, because it's 2:05. Okay, so welcome to the New Year's resolution planning. And I really want to use this time for us to come up with not only resolutions, but intentions for the year. So kind of reflecting on the intentions that we set last year for 2018 and seeing if we've reached our goal, if we've gotten anywhere, and go from there. So realistically, I thought about doing this because I wanted to do resolutions for myself. And I realized that year after year, I wasn't actually sticking to the resolution or
Right.
to any intention that I actually set. So by the time, let's say the same month happened, by the end of that month, it was all thrown out the window. The paper that I wrote everything down on was gone. Um, by the time February came, I felt the guilt of not sticking to what I was doing. Hi. We're just getting started here. By the time I'm kind of sharing how my path of making a resolution has been. So by the time, since I wasn't sticking with it, February came around. I don't know about you, but I was so guilty that I haven't been doing the resolution. And then I will still forget about it. And then June will come, which is almost halfway throughout the year. And it's also my birthday month. So my birthday month will be here, and I say, oh, I remember all of the wonderful intentions that I set for this year. Let me go back to it. And I'll do it for like a week. And then by the time December comes, I'm back here with pen and paper, and I'm saying, let me write the resolutions because I finished all of my resolutions and I haven't even touched it. I only did it for 1 week. So it's that cycle that is so annoying. And I kind of want to put a stop to that by effective planning.
Uh-oh. I think she got cut off or
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry about that.
It's
I have
okay.
my kids running around. Okay. So what I was doing was explaining, hi John, I was explaining how it's been with my New Year's resolution. So I kind of want to hear from you all how your New Year's resolution or intention planning has been over the past, let's say, 3 years. Have you actually stick to it? And what was so difficult to make it stick?
Uh, okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
Um, for me, just like explained, you pointed out, Charlene, has been the same for me as well when it comes to um, making those New Year's resolutions. And I think part of it is, before I go into that, I'll just give you an example of my resolution with eating. I love anything sugary, and I will make these resolutions where I will be like, oh, I'm gonna cut down on all the sugary stuff, or buy less snacks for my home, or stuff that is not that good for me, and start writing down stuff that I do in order to help me through that process. Exercises. I love working out, but there are times where I just don't want to. And sometimes take a break, too long of a break. For me, anything that I do or I'm trying to accomplish, if I take a break off of it too long, then I find myself getting out of that momentum where you know I'm there, like I'm getting to that goal, but I want to take a break right now, and I think that's the part where you tired or you feel like, oh my God, this is gonna work unconsciously, and you want to take a break from it. So if I do take a break from doing stuff like that, I find myself very hard to come back to my goal, come back to the place that I was before.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand the feeling. What about you, Dawn and Marie Lynn? How has your resolutions in the past benefited or haven't benefited you?
Hi, can I speak? Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah, so last year for the first time I did a vision board. So I think it summarized my main resolutions for the new year. And I look at it again later this year, and I think I have accomplished about 50%, at least 50% of the things on my list.
Okay.
And well, for the others, I realized that, well, it's not totally where I wanted to be, but at least I started something. So I think what was missing was a clearly detailed plan with milestones. I think it's easier to reach your goal when you have like intermediate milestones, because the end goal sometimes seems to be a lot of work.
Absolutely.
So I think that was just the thing missing for me, like setting clear more milestone, like after 3 months, this is what I want to accomplish. After 4 months, just to give you an idea.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree. And that's what I'll be talking about today. Because what has helped me when I stated my intentions for the year, and I was actually able to see on paper the steps that I would take to get to my goal and hold myself accountable and check in with myself every 3 months, every 6 months, every 9 months, every 12 months, I'm more likely to reach my goal that way. Instead of just writing down the whole list like I used to do, a list of the top 10 things that I knew I wanted to work on this year and just kind of leave it for the paper to kind of figure out for me. So that's what I want to go over today. I like to, first and foremost, put your intentions or what you are planning to do for the upcoming year into something that is going to actually stick. So there was times where I used to just write it on a regular piece of paper because I figured, yeah, it's a piece of paper, I can add to it, I can scratch things out, it's not as solidified. But for this situation, we really want to solidify change in our lives. So I recommend some type of book, whether it's a journal style, or even if it's just a book, like a bigger book that you can rely on, at least you have it and you're able to go back to it as what you are setting yourself up for as far as success. You're able to look at something and you're able to plan something out more effectively if you have it like right there next to you. So it's kind of like a planner. If you have a planner, you're probably going to do better off than just relying on your phone. So I like to set things into categories, and that's what I'll be doing this year. So the categories that I have chosen for myself, and I want to hear what you guys would use as a category, is self, like self-reflection, marriage, raising children, family, and work or passive income. And so I chose those categories because in the sectors of my life, those are the main breakdowns of it. Now there is some other breakdowns like homeschooling and home management, but really those things will still kind of fall under the categories that I listed. So I kind of want to hear from your perspective, what categories, if you're able to talk, what categories would you have as far as stating your intentions? How would you break up the resolutions that you have into categories. If you're not able to talk, that's fine too. Oh, was somebody gonna say something?
Um,
You're thinking. Okay.
for me, being intentional about what you're doing or something that you want to do to improve your life. I'm very big on personal growth. And because of that, there's different factors that you have to look at when it comes to that. For me, first of all, is about spending time with God, which would it will give me that focus for the rest of the day. And so I go by day with whatever I want to do, whatever my tasks are, right? I put God first. Like, for instance, now I'm in seminary, and in order to, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I homeschool my daughter. I have to study for school, and I have to be in class at the same time, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the day, sometimes in the night, right? And in order for me to do that and be a mother and a wife at the same time, I have to come home and cook. And there's so many different things that I have to do as a mother and as a wife. And then so in saying all of that, for me, it's about finding that middle ground throughout my day, kind of like in that place where I'm not anxious. I'm not going through these anxious episodes because I have to do all of it. So I make it an effort to get up and that God, and him helping me to bring my mind, spirit, oneness in a place where I'm going to do this. I'm looking forward to my day. I'm looking forward to all the things, even though there are a lot, not focusing on what I have to do, but focusing on one thing at a time. Right. And this is what we as women, as mothers, as if we're students in school, if we're wives, we have our children, whatever the case might be, we want to make sure that we have that mindset of oneness, of calm, of not being anxious and overwhelmed all the time. And my ground for that is my time with God, and I journal. I journal my thoughts. I write love letters to God. And this really helps me. All these things helps me to keep focus on a daily basis. I'm not perfect at it. I'm not completely there where I want to be, but there's been some improvements on the way I do things. Some things, some requests I have to turn down so that I can get to focus on what is priority for me. And that's another, again, prioritizing your time. And our time is really precious. And what we give it to should be really special. What we give our time to should be so special, so, worth it. Right? So, yeah, those are things that is something that really helps me to keep grounded. And for this new year, I want to be able to, that one-on-one time that really helps me to focus, spend more time, right? Going from the half an hour to 1 hour time with God, which would really help me even more, because the more you get from him, the more you internalize the calm and the beauty of him is the more focused you become.
Good, good. So in that way, what category will you put your connection with God in? Is that like a self category?
Say that again. I didn't hear.
Is that more of like a self category because the self comes first, and so you're centered?
Yeah.
around-
Yeah. Self-reflection, self-meditation, like, spend that time meditating. I may not be able to do it during the day. So my first bet is, Kaylon, you got to get up in the morning and get that. And it's kind of like an alone time as well, right? Getting up and just, it's all about the self for that hour for me, or 2 hours if I get that much. It's all about me, and then me and God, and then for the rest of the day, I mean, it belongs to everybody else.
Right. Oh, I love that. That's perfect. I love that and that's the whole beauty of it when you are creating your own resolution and you're coming up with your own categories, knowing where you are in life and where you are aiming to go, because we're always trying to go up, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about that. For me, the category of self is so vitally important to everything else, because as I mentioned in the past about making resolutions and not achieving those resolutions, it's really me, right? I'm the reason why I haven't achieved that. Nobody else. It's technically not whether I wrote it in a fancy looking book or not. It has nothing to do with that. It almost doesn't have anything to do with me writing on a piece of paper. It doesn't.
Right.
It's about, for me, it's about the reflection of self-worth. For me, that's been a big topic for me this year and going into 2019. Self-worth and increasing that and understanding or having the understanding of my inner reflection. So that's what it's really about for me, because it's that question of, do I feel worthy to have met these goals that I actually set for myself? Do I feel worthy to raise children how I want to raise them? Do I feel worthy for that to happen? And of course, having a clear plan for it. So I do recommend to break your life into categories. It's just easier. And coming up with 2 to 4 ideas of goals per category. So, for example, self, I may be adding a little bit more than what I have now. But under the category of self, find 2 to 4 things that you want to really utilize as your clearly defined goals. Make sure it's clear, because these goals are your intentions. And I always believe when you write it down, it has much more meaning than staying in your head as a thought. And when you're writing it down, you're almost saying, yes, this is definite, this is law. This is it. It is what it is, and it's written on paper for me to see, read, meditate on, and get into the subconscious of you. So make sure that it's very clearly defined. And if you're having a hard time defining those things for that category, you can ask yourself high-level questions, such as, what are my top 5 priorities for this category? That's a perfect question, because those top 5 priorities can really be your goal, if it's detailed enough. Or you can ask yourself, what are my plans for achieving in this category? So, for example, for myself, I'm going to be authentic here. For my self-reflection, my intentions are, number 1, to increase my self-worth in my mind, increase my self-worth and understanding of my inner reflection.
Right.
That's number 1. Number 2 is the balance of the form and the formless of me. So what you're looking at here, this is my form. The formless is my spirit, which you cannot see. but its presence is always there, and it actually makes everything else. 1 second. One second, my children are calling for me.
It's okay. You go right ahead. It's okay.
Okay, thank you for waiting. So I was talking about the balance of form with formless, just kind of explaining a little bit about my self intention for 2019. So the form is what you're seeing, and the formless is my spirit that you cannot see, but is affecting everything that I do, affecting my perception of myself and those around me. So it's easy for us as moms or whatever category that we have or title that we have to say, oh, I am this. Like if someone says, who are you, Charlene? And the most common answer would be, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm this, I like to do this, I am seen as this, I am a child of this. And we are not really taking into consideration that none of those things matter. None of the form matters. Your name doesn't matter. None of that matters. What really matters is the formless that we can't see. So for me, in my belief of myself, I am connected to a source that cannot be explained or described in any way. So because of that, I want to stay connected to that divinity, but have the balance in the form life, if that makes sense. So my third resolution for reflection is to live my most luminous life. So I'm a part of this group, a luminous group of women who I absolutely love. I always believe in perfect timing, and that group for me came at a perfect time in my life because I want to live a most luminous life. So in myself, my top self goals that I have for 2019, it's not about the typical that I see when it comes down to self. People are saying, okay, I want to implement more self-care, I want to lose weight, I want to gain weight, I want to do this and that, and all of it is on a form level. And that's completely understandable. The form is what you see. But for me, I want to dig inward. So nothing outside of myself, but I want to go into myself and ask myself specific questions and up my self-worth subconsciously and consciously so that everything else that I mentioned can fall into place. So for me, living a luminous life, it goes along with self-worth. It's understanding that I am able to have this luminous life that I am guaranteed to have from changing my consciousness and how I view things around me. So those are my top 3 self-intentions for 2019. Could I add another one? Possibly, but most of them do fall under the 3 that I mentioned. So for you, I want you to do the same thing for yourself. In the category of self, find 2 or 4 things that you want to really make a priority. Most of the time, I want to address the losing weight part because I've seen that in a conversation I had last week with a friend. I was talking about the same situation, and her goal was to just lose weight. That was it. She wants to lose 75 pounds. That's it. She'll be happy then. But what I presented to her was that that's a common goal for women, childbearing women. That is a common goal. But what we're not understanding is that even if you were to lose the 75 pounds, you'll still be the same person. You're still the same. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is your form. That's it. It's not enough. It has to be the consciousness. It has to be the thought behind it has to be your sole intention to actually change there. So when you're making your list, realize that all of this falls back on you, essentially, on if you achieve it or not. The second category is marriage. So I really want you to pick 2 to 4 things for marriage. And if you're not married, just call it relationships, relationships that you have maybe in your dating life or with friends as well. And raising children, that's another one for me. 2 to 4 things. And then family, 2 to 4 things. And I kind of want to explain why I chose the category of family for New Year resolution. To me, family is vitally important, but as a collective unit, I think we're even stronger. So although I can focus individually on each family member and goals on how I want to interact with each family member, it's better for me to lump it all together as family. Because my family goal, for example, may be something like I want to connect more once a week as a collective unit. This doesn't mean that we're not connecting, but if we're defining what that is, and that's the next step of each goal, you're defining what that goal means for you, we're able to go down on a cellular level of the word to really tell us what it means for us. And we'll kind of get there. And then the last one is work or passive income, because most people are working. And those who are not working still sometimes work from home or do things on the side, maybe not out of specific facilities, but they're still doing something. So after you have clearly defined your goals, these goals are your intentions, and you've asked yourself the high-level questions of what that goal should be, the next step I want you to do is to define each goal within the category. Now, it looks scary when you break it up into categories, but if you really stick to the categories, you have 10 goals right there, if you at least have 2 per category. So it's not a lot, but categorizing it, because the brain works in different ways, if you lump it all together, it can seem overwhelming. But if you tackle it at one time or one step at a time, it looks less frightening. So you can define each goal within the category and explain its value to you. Now, explaining its value to you right next to it is going to be a way for you to remember why you are trying to achieve that goal. So whenever you feel like giving up, you look at the value that it has on you, the value that it has not only on you, but on your spirit, the value that it has on other people around you that you are affecting daily. And let's just be honest, we are affecting people every single day. As soon as we walk out of the house, we're affecting someone, whether we're smiling at them or if we're looking really mean at them. We are affecting their day. Believe it or not, and you are affected too. So we're all affecting one another. So when you think about the value of your goals and what they have, not only just on you, but on the consciousness of those around you, it gets a little bit more serious for you, as it should. So, for example, let's say in raising children, maybe one of your goals is to connect more. If you were to define it and really break down what that goal means, it means that maybe you're spending more time with your child. Spending more time with your child can easily allow you to connect with your child as they get older through the phase of the teenage years, which is the hardest part, and even beyond that. So think about not just affecting yourself right now, but on a generational level, if your goal is generational success. So it happens in the mind still. I really want you to, after you explain the value of your goals, the next step is to write out how it will be measured or how that goal will be benchmarked for success. So how can you measure that? So let's say that your category is homeschooling. How are you going to measure the success in homeschooling? Should your success be based upon a test, or should your success be based upon the connectivity that you have with your child. You have to decide that. And that's what the goal list is for. And that's why it's broken into categories so that you can really define it how you need to define it for you. So after you have written down how it will be measured and benchmarked, how it will look if you are successful in it, break down the terms for your own understanding. So back to defining again, defining what you see connection as and using that as an example, or defining what you see as whatever you put down in your goals. Let's say you are in a marriage and your goal for 2019 is to be closer to your husband. What does that mean? Break it down to a deeper level. What does it mean to maybe be closer to your husband? Does that mean that you're understanding your husband? Are you trying to change your husband? You have to ask yourself these questions. Even if it's relationships, maybe you're dating. Hold on. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, I got a notification from Zoom. Maybe you are dating. Is marriage your goal? Have you spoken about marriage? Have you brought up marriage? Are you able or willing to leave the relationship if it doesn't lead to marriage? These are questions that you have to ask yourself, because a goal by itself is just words on a paper unless you're actually planning. So we're going to get into that part as well, but this is just the first part. So just to reiterate, you have listed categories that work for yourself, 5 or more categories, 5 to 7 categories, and listed 2 to 4 goals per category. You want them to be clearly defined because these goals are your intentions. If you have a hard time with those goals or coming up with something in those categories, base it off of high-level questions such as, what are my top 5 priorities for this category? Or questions like, what do I want to plan to achieve in that category? The next thing for you to do is define each goal right next to it. You can put it in parentheses. Define it within the category and explain its value. On that same line, you want to write how success is measured, how you can benchmark for success in that particular goal in that category. And the last thing is to break down the terms for your own understanding so that there's no hiccups, no jargons that you don't understand that you wrote down. The next thing I want you to ask yourself for each goal is, who is accountable for that? Who is accountable for each goal? Now, of course, we've talked about self-reflection. We are accountable for our own goals. However, ask yourself if you need an accountability partner. If you need to feel more motivated in your life, ask yourself, define motivation. What does it look like for you? And this will go under self. So define motivation, what it looks like for you. Write down the value of motivation and how that will impact your life and those around you. How would it be measured? How do you know that you're motivated? What benchmark do you have? And then lastly, finding out who is that partner for your accountability. You can have many different partners for accountability. It's okay. Maybe there's one person in mind particularly who will be able to be accountable with you for all of them. But remember, this is your journey, and it's you essentially. And so even if your accountability partner falls off, it's still on you. So yes, you can have goal friends, you can have friends who you're planning your goals together, but be mindful of the accountability partner that you choose as well. The next part of this conversation I want to get into is projections, because this is the hardest part of making the resolution or intention for the year. So in your projections, first, before I go on, because I'm just rambling, does anyone have any questions so far? Because the next portion gets a little bit more difficult. Let me check the chat box. Oh, I can hear you.
No.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm getting into the projection part. this is where it can get kind of confusing, but I will be giving an example for this. Before I go on, I'm going to take a quick break from my dog. 1 second. Okay, thank you for holding. So the next one is projection. And for projections, we're kind of going to work backwards. We're going to work a little backwards, and I'll explain it. So the first type of projection is what I like to call the lead projection. And it's called the lead projection because this will determine if you have what it takes to support the goal that you came up with. So this isn't necessarily on the lines of self-worth, but if you have what it takes, meaning you're writing out the steps that it takes to get there. So what does this goal take? That's the big question for the lead projection. And you're going to write it out. So even though you may have more than 10 with your categories combined, I still want you to really keep it in categories because it's better, and write out underneath it, like if you were doing like a bullet point, write down what it takes to get to that goal. And really think about it. This is where the brainstorm comes in. Like, for example, if you know that, I don't know, give me an example. I'm trying to think of something that is more, I don't know, all-inclusive, or that many people have. But let's say that you wanted a fascinating marriage. Let's use that as an example. You have to determine what it takes in order to get there. So you'll have to ask yourself, what does it take to have a fascinating marriage? So remember, we're defining things again, going back to the steps before, clearly defined goals. What is fascinating? What does this mean? How are we going to measure it? Okay, and then when it comes down to the projection, this is where you say, this is what I need to do. So for the lead projection, you may say, I heard about this book that I want to read. Even if it's not Fascinating Womanhood. Let's say it's another book that you think may serve you. You can write it down. Maybe you can say that you are going to go to a marriage counselor. Maybe it's time to take that step. That's something that you can also put down. So this is what it takes, not just the steps to take, but I also want you to think about the emotion that goes into it, or the characteristics that you have to have. Because we know that any goals that we are trying to achieve, it doesn't take fear. We know that. So if we were to X fear out of the equation, what is it that we would actually need in order to make this goal happen? The next projection is our expectation projection. I have something in the chat. Oh, okay. Okay, someone is writing in the chat. Okay. The next one is our expectation projection, and this is how you get there. And then after that, it's our scheduled projection, which is the time frame of the projections, whether it's the 3-month time frame, the 6 months, the 9 months, and the 12 months. So this seems like a lot of work, right? Making projections seems like a lot of work to do, but it does take work if you're trying to make an impact in your life. It takes work. It takes some habit changing. It takes different levels of consciousness to shape your reality. It takes a whole mindset change on what you're doing. And just remember, when you are making this list and when you're doing these projections, this is what you wanted. This is what you put on your goal list, no one else. And if you put it there, let's think like a champion would. We have to actually complete the task. So even on those times where you are feeling a little bit maybe undermotivated to complete that task, remember you have the projections to assist you. You've outlined your partner of accountability for each goal that you have if you need one. So this should be a clear guide for you. Do you have any questions? Or any input, anything that you want to input on the projection section because that's where it happens. No? Okay. I wanted to kind of give an example of projections that are realistic. This is just an example, and I chose the topic of raising children because for those who are moms and those who want to be mothers, and even if you can't have children, we're always mothers. We're mothers to everybody around us. That's just how it is. And I want you to keep that in mind. But for those who have children already, most of the time, depending on the age of the child, it can get difficult. So in this example, I chose three goals as an example. The first one, control anger, because that's very common for people who want that as a goal. The second one, spend more time. That's a common and realistic goal for raising children. And the third one is to know alternatives to situations. That's also a common for raising children. But within those three things, or three goals that I picked, I broke them down even more as an example. So for the first one, to control anger as an intention for next year, what does that mean? What does that look like? So if we were to break it down, let's say we'll break it down to the thought of being more curious with your child, more curious as to why they're doing particular things or why they are behaving a particular way. Usually when we are in stillness, we're able to analyze the why if we're connecting. So in order for us to really connect, to start the connection, we would have to be a little bit more curious. So I broke that down, controlling anger, because it's so vague. Anger is vague. And usually it's really just a reflection of you, but that's a whole nother topic. It's just vague, so we have to break it down. For spending more time, I actually broke it down to spending more time in the moment as is. Because there's always time. Time is always there. So spending more time means what? Do we really need an extension of the 24 hours in the day? Or do we have to be more intentional about the time that we do have to spend? Being in the as-is moment is the hardest thing in parenting. So this is an example. Spending more time is so vague. What does that mean? We have to ask ourselves what it means. So that really means being in the as-is moment. That means that we're not thinking about our child doing something and saying, oh, they're going to turn out this way, they're going to turn out that way. That is actually a future. Thank you for holding. Okay, so the third one is to know alternatives to situations. And you can think about the alternatives specifically that you're looking for. What situations are you wanting to know the alternatives to? And are the situations that you're talking about stemming from lack of spending more time, number two, or is it coming from the way that you are controlling your anger? So it kind of goes together, but it's a good thing to have because at least you know in your mind and in your subconscious that this is something that you need to work on. This is just an example, but it's good to know. And then we break it down a little bit more when it's time to do our projections. So now we want to find out what these, or how to measure these three goals. So the first one, controlling anger. Can we measure that with our child speaking to us more freely or being more open to hearing what we have to say? Can we measure that by the way that our child smiles at us? Or can we measure that by the amount of fun that your child is appears to be having. How can we measure that? So that's what you can ask yourself for there. Spending more time, how can we measure that as well? Are you able to really research the psychological development age of your child, no matter how old they are? Are you able to kind of have an understanding of where your child is psychologically in development to gauge that level of success? So that's something that you can do, and it also goes into our projections. So if you notice, when you start talking about the value that it may have on you, or you start talking about just the way to measure through that connectivity of the goals, you start to see that the projections will automatically come out because you have to know the why. So, and then our last one, knowing alternatives to situations. Well, there are books on parenting, tons of books on parenting. There's podcasts on parenting, and there's also local groups like on Meetup where the focus is on parenting. So this is just an example on raising children, but the categories are vast, and so it can be more than this. For self, for example, are there courses that you're able to take from wisdom teachers? A wisdom teacher that I personally love the message of is Dr. Shafali. There are wisdom teachers out there who are giving a gift to you and to the rest of the world by speaking about their level of consciousness and how they are perceiving things to be. So YouTube is a great platform for this because you can find videos on almost anything. So it's up to you. It's your self-reflection, having a word with God, like how you mentioned earlier. And so how are you able to measure that? And how are you able to make that a goal? And then there's family, of course, and we're kind of going backwards here. Just to reiterate, there's family. Are you looking to maybe implement more connectivity with your family? Is your idea of family, meaning that you are vacationing once a year, a huge vacation? Is that your connectivity with your family? What goal do you have? Are you looking to put together a maybe a family heirloom that you're going to pass from generation to generation? Is this something that you're thinking about? So having that clear goal and the projection for it really helps. So I kind of want to show you an example of these projections that I did for homeschooling last year. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen with it. Here we go. And this will just give you an example of what your projection chart can look like. Like this is for homeschooling. This is from last year, actually in 2017. But this will still be beneficial in some way so that you can see how projections are looking. Okay, resume recording. Okay, awesome. So, okay. So these are projections that I made for 2018, 2019 for one of my children. In the categories, as you see, it's math, and then it goes deeper in comparing, counting, geometry and spatial reasoning, and this is what I did. So here are how projections kind of play out, and when I talk about setting up categories for our lives, this is, of course, homeschooling, but it's still the same idea. So marriage will be your category, like how comparing is, and then these are your steps. So for my child, comparing, I wanted him to know these things for comparing for the year 2018 through 2019. So the first lesson starts with, are there enough? And what I actually did was link some of these to other places. So if I click on the link, this is my accountability part for myself for homeschooling. Let me see if I'm able to do it. No. Okay. All right, I'm waiting for it to pop up. Okay, control click. Okay. Okay, hold on, because it's loading. It's a little slow. Okay, so here is, if you're able to see the video, are you able to see the screen? This is an example of what I had for one of the projections. If I clicked on the projections, it'll bring me
Right
to this.
now, the screen is dark.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Yeah, I can't see anything. It's just blank.
Oh, okay. Let me see. Try this again. Okay. Are you able to see the screen now?
Yeah, I'm seeing two butterflies.
Yes.
Oh, I'm seeing
Yes. Okay. Awesome. So one of the projections that I had, Are There Enough? It actually, when I clicked on it, it sent me to this web page, which I linked it together on iExcel as an example of what I wanted to make my pages look like, or wanted to make my hands-on activities look like. So maybe we would go out and pick flowers, or maybe I would use a butterfly picture to connect if there is enough tulips for the butterfly. This is just an example as a projection. So when you are making projections, we talked about the steps that you're taking in order to make the proper projection. These are my projections, and so my steps were basically from the link that I was clicking. So this is just an example of how your projections can look. If it's marriage, you would have, maybe instead of Are There Enough? You would have something that is relating to marriage, maybe reading a particular book. And you can put next to it where you should be reading that, or on the document or if you talk about that you want to see 2008. So it is really that for project maybe we're going to do the so if you want to make something one month through a appreciation algorithm that you're able to connect with something different way. And of course the background, you know, that husbands are different in our lives, and reflect on something that so for example, these words is you amazing always have little take for these goals because agree much and not involved. That is really so to kind of show an example of how a projection chart will look, even though it's on the basis of homeschooling, you can still do the same thing for your own personal growth. Are there any questions? Because I've been saying a mouthful.
my question is, can you post that so that we can get that? I think that's amazing information, right? I love it.
Post the sorry, it was like kind of choppy. Are you saying post the Word document?
Yes.
Yes, I can, and I will actually try to give just an example or sample of one in the topics that we talked about too, for self, marriage, raising children, family, so that we can kind of relate it more appropriately to the situation that we're talking about. But definitely, I can do that. I will.
Yes, I love it.
Good. Thank you. Well, I still have more goal planning to do. I only have really self-examined for my personal goals. But I do want to say that even if you are planning your goals for 2019, you can still start. Just start. It doesn't matter if it's on a Friday. It doesn't matter if it's on a Sunday. Just start. You don't have to wait until the new year, because how the brain sees it is that, okay, we're waiting and we're just sitting idly. And when that new year comes, we're going to find an excuse to just wait a little bit longer and sit idly. And that's not going to really help. So I have tried vision boards in the past, and they were amazing because they were beautiful in color and picture and everything that I can think of. But I didn't have the details of what I actually needed to do. So I want to encourage you to really dig deep. If you have to do research, so be it. Do research on the things that you want to do to achieve. sometimes there is research that needs to be done. If you have to talk to someone else, talk to them. Don't be afraid to ask, how did you do this? How can I get there? So that they can help you and give you their tips and you guys can work together and do it. So really focus on that and really take that and run with it. So I'm going to leave you with that. I don't have anything else. Sorry. I can't hear you.
Okay.
Hi.
Is this fascinating womanhood stuff? Oh, hi. I'm so sorry, dear. You can put us on mute while she teaches, you know, so she doesn't hear me. Big mouth.
I did.
Oh, okay. All right.
All
Have
right.
fun. Sorry.
I know husbands are great. When my husband comes home, I was like, mute. I understand. Well, if there's any more questions, please let me know. I'm available. You can go to The Fascinating Wife if you want more information about some of the classes that I offer. I actually have a patron account. It's called A Fascinating Journey that I am revamping to kind of talk about that self-reflection that we were talking about in the beginning and to actually talk about these categories of 2019. So I guess it's a greater extension of this, but it's a place for me to be more authentic and to share more a part of me. Just because I feel like I'm not the only one to have the certain goals that I have in the categories that I pick. So if you're interested in that, you can also let me know, or maybe I'll post a link to that, and maybe we can be on this journey together. Because remember, I want to live a luminous life. And in order for me to do that, there are certain steps that I have to put into play. So, yeah, and that's it. Take care.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.